So now we're going to move on to our next presentation, titled To Be Educated and Guided, A Migration from Mind, Body, and Heart, which will be presented by Jordan Bighorn. Born in 1978 to Deloria and Jacob Bighorn, Jordan is of the Lakota heritage hailing from the Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes. He currently serves as Executive Director of Community Education Development Association, a nonprofit organization located in the North End community of Winnipeg, Manitoba, on Treaty 1 territory. He is a passionate laborer in the field of truth and reconciliation, with particular focus on emerging landscapes of community-based education. Jordan, Millennia, and their children also serve in a focused neighborhood where local youth gather on a weekly basis to consider how service to humanity can change the world. Jordan also serves on the National Spiritual Assembly of Canada. Welcome, Jordan.
Got to figure out which bottle of water Borna was drinking from. I got to get some of that. What a presentation. Oh, you got it there. Okay. Wow. I owe so much to this stage, to this conference, to this executive committee, to individuals that are in the audience, both from Winnipeg, both from my immediate family, and dear friends who are, I'm sure, here from the concourse, the other side camp, as we would say. One in particular, I'd just like to acknowledge the Reverend David Lowe. He and his dear wife, Christy, had planned to be here, but he is at another conference. And if you recall the passage from The Guardian, who describes a way of identifying just who is a Baha'i, which I know these days is quite the question. Around the world, so much change in what it means to adhere to this faith. And The Guardian offers an opportunity to look around at our protagonists, our friends, our community, and he says that when an individual comes into a space and leads a life in such a degree of character, of service, etc., it is the people who will say, that man is assuredly a Baha'i. And as far as I'm concerned, and what I saw at the services that David himself outlaid as a reverend in the Lutheran Church, who are a member of our local spiritual assembly, in that service read the Baha'i prayer for the departed, the dead, and the entire congregation stood up in honor of this prayer and the service that this man led. It was to me, again, another insight to the acknowledgement of the change of recognition of what it means to be a Baha'i. What I hope to get through today, and understanding that there is some time restriction, which is actually probably good because it'll help me get to this last slide, an idea that I'm actually quite concerned about, a little bit afraid, you might say. But it's a healthy fear because it's also, I think, indicative of what I've come to understand that can happen on this stage. You see, the first time I was up here in 2003, my life changed in a number of ways. First of all, I quit drinking, so that was a big thing. It wasn't the only thing I was doing, but the second time, and it was actually here in Calgary in 2014, shortly after that conference, I got married. So I don't know which one did more, better, or worse for my life. My wife is still back at home in Winnipeg, so maybe that's some indication, but no, it's... Borna was sharing about the technology and what Baha'u'lláh brought more than just his word, if that's even enough. What was that first telegraph that was sent around the world at that time? What hath God wrought? And what is Abdu'l-Bahā's cry, O Bahá'u'lláh, what hast thou done? I don't know. So this presentation will have, yes, a lens from an Indigenous perspective, my experiences and observation, my endeavors to follow this path from our beloved and our master and our guardian and our house of justice. But also acknowledging there are things here on this land, on this hemisphere of the planet, that has yet to, I think, play its part. And so those are some of the thoughts I hope to work through. But first, we need to center ourselves. It's so appropriate that we have this image of Turtle Island. My son here commented that he thought that perhaps maybe this was, and it looks like it is now, they see inside a braid of sweetgrass, perhaps, that is around this, which is so appropriate. So we'll just have a minute's meditation, and you'll see land, very special land. Land that was about to change, even though perhaps it was waiting for this change, for the call from the Universal House of Justice in 2003 for the Canadian community to raise a Majlikul Eskar, a house of worship. There's still time to go and visit that land as it stood for thousands of years before it is transformed to stand for another thousands of years. So I encourage you, if you have a chance, to go and pray at that place. How easy could this be with technology and communication? I don't have to say a word. We kind of have a nice sense of what I'm speaking about. But in light of our current territory, Treaty 7, and acknowledgement that this beautiful animal and how it represents in other parts of the world, we might bring it back to an animal that was equally as important to our peoples here on Turtle Island. And again, so much more to be expressed than just food, clothing. This was a relative. This was the most precious relative, an ambassador of this earth that allowed us to sustain ourselves and teach us so much about our relationship with the Creator. But the thing that must be addressed is a quote. First part of a quote, and many of you are familiar with it. The elephant or the buffalo is that this is a problem. This is an academic, scholarly, investigative environment, so I hope you didn't put in any values or judgment when I say that. What is a problem? It's a question, it's an inquiry, it's a curiosity, it's a problem. Why? What is this? What does it mean? There's the rest of this quote that you may be familiar with. Why is there are very, very few expressions in our writings that seem to target or highlight or describe and single out a people. My father, Jacob Bighorn, and all the things that our people have to manage today, our own healing, our own reclamation, our own sense of justice, our own languages. We have to do all those things, on top of which, if you know the rest of that quote, we're supposed to do something else. That's a lot. And if you look around, particularly in Manitoba, 40% of Indigenous youth are not graduating from high school. This is not really a good bet to bet on us to enlighten the world at this time, if I were to look at it through that lens. Anybody watch The Price is Right? If you bet over, you know? Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know if the fellas in the back, maybe we can turn up the volume a little bit more. We'll have some more audio coming. Or if we saw all the beautiful children and youth, I'm a child of the 80s, and if you took it as another invitation, just like the House of Justice uses that term of the dialectic, this relationship between one state and another, that this could be like a mushroom, a particular mushroom. A super mushroom. Something that really, again, this problem in question, okay, what is this? What is Jordan really talking about here? Okay, we're really going off the deep end already. There's going to be kind of 3 phases to this, and I hope to kind of get through them all in a bit of a journey. So, like most of us here, we see already this morning, what do we do first? On any journey, we pack. We pack our belongings, and so we'll start with a bit of packing. This universe, so much more now, thanks to, again, technology, being able to understand our relationships, see farther, think about things, which really only, no matter what technology can provide, it's our kind of crazy astrophysicists and mathematicians and so on that are seeing things in their numbers. So I'll call this the mind. The next, of course, our Mother Earth, our one home, all the theories, all the conundrums, all the paradoxes of this vast infinite space, and yet there's just this one planet so far that we know that we call home. So I'll call this our body. And then another world that we all come from. That's all of us right there. We know this to be true beyond science, beyond fact, etc. All these 3 worlds are one and the same, and yet I want to kind of focus on the properties that can distinguish each. I just want to acknowledge at this time, many of us, especially in Canada, for those who are welcome from the southern border, this esteemed elder, Maurice Sinclair, Mazina Gizik Iban, who passed away just this last year, led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Canada, which was an endeavor to open up truth-telling on behalf of survivors of the residential schools. And while all the fanfare of a federal government apology to a settlement to potential change in policy, that's kind of like the storm around the center, where on stages like this, with ceremony, with care, with intention, nothing happened in that space but listening. Listening for survivors to listen to themselves in a way that they've never been able to before. For children to hear from their families like they never have before. And he describes later in life how the weight that put on his soul and his heart probably led to an earlier passing. But the services provided for him in Winnipeg, the entire federal, national, provincial leadership were there to honor him in Winnipeg, just around this theme of service and truth. And one of the things that he said, among many, was the road we travel is equal in importance to the destination we seek. There are no shortcuts to reconciliation. To take a step to Abdu'l-Bahá, because again, when you think of this in terms of bringing life and truth, there's the other side of this cycle where we will leave this place. No matter what we learn, no matter what truth and stories we gain, we are also going to go someplace else. And there's an equal importance to no shortcuts. And Abdu'l-Bahá says, as just the composition, the formation, and growth and development of the physical body have come about by degrees, so too must its decomposition and dispersal be gradual. If the disintegration be rapid, this will cause an overleaping and a slackening in the chain of transferences, and this discontinuity will impair the universal relationships within the chain of created things. If you ever wanted a really overwhelming way to respond to somebody who wonders why we don't cremate, have them try to unwind that one. The process of allowing the body to fully decompose in the time that it needs to is to get to visualize yourself, this temple of your soul plugging itself back in to the weaving of creation. To our house of justice, described as the one place to ensure the integrity and the flexibility of this revelation, of the plan. Thank God. In Rizwan 2010, Baha'u'llah's revelation is vast. It calls for profound change, not only at the level of the individual, but also in the structure of society. The work advancing in every corner of the globe today represents the latest stage of the ongoing Baha'i endeavor to create the nucleus of the glorious civilization enshrined in his teaching, the building of which is an enterprise of infinite complexity and scale, one that will demand centuries of exertion by humanity to bring to fruition. There are no shortcuts, no formulas. I'd like to bring us back to our space here as we'll move into this next phase where we need to center ourselves. I also have a little secret, little unofficial, unsanctioned. I'm looking for Karen because she's probably going, don't. The temple is built. We know that's more than just an event in our history. The beautiful Friday plenary of sharing the foundations of this continent's administrative endeavors, the beginnings, the billiards hall, I love that. The women to build that temple. And I recall Mr. Bowers in an elevator chat once describing after the call for the Canadian community to raise its national temple, in light of the temples being raised around the world today, that perhaps there could be a revisioning or a re-establishing of relationship with the Mother Temple of the West. As we would have heard, it was raised in context of that time. The temple is being raised today, as the House of Justice has described this temple as being mutual elements of one divine project, that you would raise a building and a community at the same time. And of course, all the elements that we have available to do so are overwhelming. I also have to say that we also know this to be true of our temple because it's been so decreed by one of our counselors. I'm not going to say which one, but I think he's from Cameroon. When we took this picture, you see, if we could put the picture back up, and you see that the trees have this kind of arc. It's a dome. It's beautiful. It'll be cold. There are no bathrooms. But the inspiration of a temple rising out of the land, surrounded by trees, which the House of Justice, of course, has given its blessing. Because you might wonder, well, we can't see it. What are we going to do? What about the leaves? They're going to fall all over it. Well, is it a most appropriate, particularly from a standpoint of an Indigenous way of understanding our relationship with land, that this could be an opportunity to further explore that relationship? Okay, we're going to hear from an elder. We're going to make some space in our mind. We're going to now enter into a different kind of ceremony.
The Christian story may be a good story over there where it originated, but it was not a good story for us. Our stories grew up right from the land, from the sky, and so on. At a cultural level, it's almost as though they wanted to make us empty. When you have somebody with no culture, then there's no guiding norms, there's no guiding ways, there's no grandmas, there's no grandpas to tell us the story and so on that guides our life. I would like to leave one thought with the audience, and that is, it's kind of the vogue on the part of scientists to go and have a conversation with the Dalai Lama. Well, these two scientists, they went to visit him. He told them, hey, in our tradition, we have to make tea for our visitors. So he got busy and made some tea for them. The cup was full, but he kept pouring. It was spilling all over the place. These two scientists were looking at each other. What's wrong with this guy? So finally, one of them said, hey, the cup is full. It's spilling all over. And he kind of says, oh, okay. Then he looked at the two guys and he says, you know what? You guys know too much. How about if you go back home and empty your minds out a little bit? Because if we talk right now, that knowledge will be like this cup. It'll just spill over. And we won't learn anything. Most of our ceremonies are about emptying your cup, emptying your mind, and so on, so new knowledge can come about. And that's why you go and see an elder for a teaching, they always hold a ceremony. And in Western science, in our modern world, ceremony is missing.
My eldest son graduated from high school this year. And inshallah, as if the visa gods are favorable, he'll be going to serve in Haifa, so hopefully all of that learning can be emptied out. So I'm going to take us through a ceremony, a bit of an example that could wrap these three themes, these three images, these three bodies, these three entities together, mind, body, and heart. From Baha'u'lláh, all that is in heaven and earth I have ordained for thee except the human heart. My grandfather would say that the most sacred ceremony is the birth of a child. That new life, that sacred purity, the future of a people in that child. We know physiologically that the heart is the first primary organ to develop. It's the most important. How we interact with the heart in both medical or even in first aid, CPR situations. You listen for that heartbeat. Is it vibrating? And then, as you know, when that heart beats its last and that body goes cold so quick, right? Say yes, it's the warm blood that the heart's pumping around. Is it the energy of the soul? But very quickly, we go cold without the heat of our heart. And for our communities, you may have heard that the drum is the heartbeat of our nation. The drum here, it's beating. And this kind of next few slides are going to try to bring us through a connection again of how Native people in many places, and I think really Indigenous peoples all over, found ways to connect themselves. So for example, thanks to technology, the good parts of technology today, this is my firstborn. And so is this. Just waiting for parents to pick up your kids. I know. But you know, both those sounds, right? You go to that first appointment, your mothers, you're listening for that heartbeat with that technology. If you don't hear that, there's a problem. When that child comes out and we don't hear that, there's a problem. Yeah? Our body, as Baha'u'lláh says, regard the world as the human body. This is our Mother Earth. All across, all cultures have this association and acknowledgement to our mother. 1968, again, technology, the first time that the world has had a color, fully distributed, printed image of this very picture. Despite all the technology, all the learning, all the philosophizing, all the descriptions, etc., none of us could claim on such a mass scale to be able to visually see where we come from, our home. Great is thy blessedness, O earth, for thou hast been made the footstool of thy God, and has been chosen as the seat of his mighty throne. So you have that going for you as well. And from an Indigenous standpoint, this truly is much reflected, of course, in our writings and teachings as well, of this purpose of this life, is the womb of the spiritual world. So let's go there. I grew up on this side of the Turtle Island continent with oceans and mountains, but now I live on the prairies. It's flat. No oceans, no mountains, but my goodness, is there a beautiful symphony there. With that in mind, I'd like you to listen to another elder who speaks about this relationship to land.
Ernest Tutus is a spiritual leader of the Cree, known and respected by other Indians throughout North America. He is a direct descendant of Poundmaker, carrying on the struggle of his people. Ernest strongly believes that in the customs, traditions, and beliefs of centuries ago lies the very future of his people. For as far back as we know, the Plains Cree have had a belief in a single god, Manitou, the Great Spirit, who has many servants or spirit powers, the air, the fire, the water, all the spirits of creation. When asked about his traditional beliefs, an Indian usually does not expound doctrine. He does not discuss theology in the abstract. The natural world around him, the animals, the birds, the plants, the rocks and stones, these are the elements that define his religion. Sitting next to Poundmaker's grave, Ernest started talking about God and creation.
Our story, the way the older people tell us that It's very, very close to something like Adam and Eve, but it just happens that a North American Indian never disobeyed in his garden. That's why in 1492 they found us living on this land and God was taking care of everything. We let him run the business and we didn't have to work like the white man did. And he provided our food, the air on land and in water, and all we had to do was live in harmony with his creation and respect God above all. And this is Holy Land. This is land where man has never disobeyed God. That is to live against nature, to be building dams, to tear the land, and to try and conquer nature. We never did. And this is Holy Land. This water running down here, the Cut Knife Creek here, and then there's Battle River runs down there. And the old people tell us that these are the right hand instruments and servants of God. It's the sun, the wind, and the water, and the fire. These are holy things, spiritual things. We're supposed to live with those things.
If we come back to the prairies as a story and example, and then further weaving. It is said that once a long time ago, in the quiet evening after sunset, the full moon lit the clear sky in which the stars were shining brightly and the people at camp were preparing for nightfall. Suddenly, out of the twilight, they had a beautiful voice singing out of the prairie. It was a voice of a man, so they checked the camp to see who was missing and thereby account for the mysterious singing, but everyone was there. So the people decided to investigate by walking into the prairie and surround the beautiful voice they heard. And as they tightened the circle, at last they came close enough to see that the singer was not a man, but a lone coyote. Then and there, they learned the song from the coyote. And today we sing it when we worship. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever heard a coyote, but again, you have to think back to times where we weren't waiting for the latest Taylor Swift album to come out to grace our eardrums. We didn't have as beautiful and wonderful as the voice of Martin Kerr earlier with the guitar and the children. We didn't have that back then. We had the sound of the prairie. So a coyote, again, nowadays you might be running. Where's the kids? Oh, this is not right. It's not natural. They're coming too much into the city. But what was Ernest speaking of? Where was he drawing this understanding? This image from the temple I was sharing with Borna once, the last time we were there, I felt like this was that Sidratul Muntaha, the tree beyond which there is no passing. If I have time, I'll share a story of one of my children who felt he could go past that tree, but maybe that's for another time. When thou readest the written book, thou wilt become aware of the mysteries of God. But when thou gazest at the book of creation, thou wilt observe the signs, symbols, realities, and reflections of the hidden mysteries of the bounties of his holiest, the incomparable one. For Native peoples in trying, what did we have? Crafts, arts, voice, ceremony. Of course, now we're learning in a different context the power of the arts. But back then, when that's all we had, of ingenuity, of craft, of hand, of heart, we did things to try to reflect that spirit. But the mind cannot think Great Spirit, Wakan Tanka, or conceive reality as it truly is. Thus, additional songs have been given to us, songs with music only, praise expressed throughout a few sacred syllables which go beyond the mind, beyond language, and say the inexpressible. Sing what is intellectually unutterable. These are perhaps the very chants which the spirits themselves sing, similar to the hosannas and hallelujahs of another tradition. This teaching and story from the late John Around Him, a very sacred medicine person from where I come from. And where would we have a reflection of praises and spiritual language that is unutterable? Prayer that is beyond the murmur of syllable and sound. So friends and fellas in the back, if there's a little more volume, because this weaving together is just, again, using technology to experience something. But for me, if I ever were to have an opportunity to somehow get Doc Brown to create that DeLorean time machine and go back and experience the context of interacting with the book of creation, this is what it would look like to me, and I hope you can feel the connection as well. I hope you heard it. I hope you did. This desperate need to be in union with our Creator through the material of our bodies, our earth, and yet the interconnectedness of it is so beyond what we can imagine, closer to our life vein, as Baha'u'lláh says. That next world is just with the veil of your eyelid right there. And so any time that we might want to create something traditionally, it was done precisely as you just saw. At the birth of a child, the singing of a song, the making of a drum is as you are having a spiritual interaction with the book of creation. So let's go to the mind. The domain of his decree is too vast for the bird of the human mind to traverse. And yet, we were created to know and to love him. But knowledge is the most grievous veil between man and his creator. Okay, that's better. A little bit more safer. I don't have to wonder that this vast revelation, this universe, this world, this relationship with my wife, I'm supposed to know this and love this? It's too much. This is just kind of another scientific fact as well. I don't know if folks kind of really conceptualize this, or maybe you're kind of aware of it. Okay, it's physiological, it's biological, but that the eyes, I think the language that I read somewhere, that kind of pop out of a pocket of your brain as it develops. They're not a separate kind of glow, ball in your skull that's kind of connected to your, they come out of your brain and that interface with your brain. And so we would have heard other stories. I think it was another presentation that talked about Chuck Egerton and his team and the face, the mirror of the face to the soul. And what we sang about this morning, let your eye be chaste, because it's going right into your mind. And then consciousness, the mind, we know it's eternal. It's the thing that will be there when our heart beats its last. What is that all about? So I'm going to ask Wilfred Buck to share. These two clips are from an incredible film about his life. He's from Winnipeg, The Starman, as he's known. It's on Prime. I encourage you to watch it.
Our knowledge is a dream. That's where it started. One of our esteemed elders by the name of Dr. Leroy Littlebear said that technology, maybe 30 years ago, that was a dream, and now it's a reality. Other methodologies arrive at knowledge in different ways, but the same ideas are there. They're just seen from totally different perspectives. We had a sweat lodge last night, and one of the reasons why we go into Matutsan, a sweat lodge, is to understand that we're part of something that we'll never understand. And it's okay we never understand it. It's okay. It's good that we don't understand it, because if we try to understand it, we get big, huge, massive heads. Because, yeah, I know everything. And it's good that you make peace with the unknown. Because the unknown is where you get your questions, where you get the answers, where you get the dreams, where you get all those things from, the unknown.
Yesterday was very powerful to be invited by Wilfred into his sweat lodge. And what I found powerful about that is that you invited us in your space. And I felt that space was very different from a space like this. It was completely lacking of the coordinates that I'm used to hold on to when I'm making sense of the world. So the only way I could engage with that space was actually to let go and to surrender to the experience. At a time when we look at science and technology as the cradle of progress, I also recognize that you have brought an understanding that is very sophisticated because it is embedded in a community ethics, in a way of living together in harmony with each other and the environment. And it also encourages us to question what is the purpose of the work that we are doing in our academic institutions.
You know, friends, so much of what we've all heard in the workshops, the plenaries, just this morning, it's all the same thing. It's just so multiple reflection, and it's almost the most frustrating thing that we're so limited, right? This fleshy body that we have, this weak heart, this fragile mind, because you just want to take it all. And thank goodness we have other language from Baha'u'lláh that describes, like, we would just, if we were even given that much more, we would just be dumbfounded. We just could not. So we'll move now to the travel. We packed a little bit, some concepts, some themes, just some terminology, a bit of an experience. This is a photo. Sorry, guys, I know I keep flipping back and forth, of the Atlantic Ocean. So this next kind of thought is just the curiosity for those relatives, those ancestors there, and the first time they saw something coming over the horizon. The book of creation is the command of God and the repository of divine mysteries. In it there are great signs, universal images, perfect words, exalted symbols, and the secrets of all things, whether of the past or of the future. Now, we could take an archaeological lens on that to say, well, the past is just what we can dig up. The future is what algorithms now can somehow project. In the writings, of course, all these hidden things, powers, and systems are there until we have technology or other means to interface with them to bring them into some type of ability to see, to hear, to interact with. And one of those things happened to me recently, like many of us on YouTube. Something came up that caught my attention, that it's one of those things, like that's when the algorithm, I guess, kind of works for you a little bit. But at the same time, if you see the title of this video, Columbus Discovering America was a great achievement. Oh man, I thought this was on the other side of how are you clickbaiting me, are you getting me all upset, etc. It's Joe Rogan, no less. Oh my gosh, how did that end up on my feed? But I want to play this for you because, again, envision, imagine, remember, anytime something has been brought to you, brought to us, brought to your children, brought to your leadership, and it has hit that wall, and it's so uncomfortable, and we don't take the time to carry through.
The glaciers melt back into the oceans. The ocean levels rise, closing the land bridge, stranding a branch of the human species for 10,000 years. Those humans who made it across that land bridge and spread out into North America, Central America, South America, have only a few families as their parent genetic origin. Okay? It's like some research says it's like 8 family lineages populated the entire North and South American continents. Then the land bridge breaks. Now you have Europe, Asia, Africa, and North and South America, and they know nothing of one another. So 10,000 years is not enough to grow 3 heads or, 12 fingers, but our species is separate. Now, Columbus crosses the Atlantic, makes contact with humans. This is the first time that has happened in 10,000 years. We have rejoined 2 branches of the human species. We are now one common genetic group.
If we take to heart that this call, this revelation, this purpose is much to know and to love God, but to seek oneness, to understand that unity is a kind of technology that we have yet to see in the kind of illumination that Baha'u'lláh speaks of versus your LED light. And if at any point that kind of wall comes to you like, oh, this doesn't sound right, this is kind of pushing me away, you got to find a way to change some of your senses. Close your eyes to it. Close your ears to it. Close your nose to it. And then use another sense to move forward. Because had I clicked off of that, had I thought, well, yes, my ancestors, my community, the very discourse of a lot of Indigenous community will have a hard time accepting a scientific bearing land straight history. And there's a particular reason for that, for how much oppression has happened, to say that this is just a means of reclamation, this is just a means of hanging on to what we have, is that we've always been here, we've never come from over there, etc. But you kind of can have both with oneness. Oneness kind of allows it all to come home, right? Because if indeed this was a situation of 2 branches of the human family, 2 genetic codes that were finally brought together, this still fits with an Indigenous concept and understanding and worldview that we're missing relatives, that we weren't the only ones here, and we were waiting for people to come. In the holy books, it is recorded that when the Sun of Truth dawns, it will appear in the east, and its light will be reflected in the west. The religions of God have been promulgated, the teachings of God have been spread, and the law of God founded in the east. The Orient has always been the center of lights. The West has acquired illumination from the East, but in some respects, the reflection of the light has been greater in the Occident, in the West. So I just have a few thoughts. Just again, this will be now into some of the idea, the trappings of the mind, promptings of heart. This is one planet. This is still one home. This is 2025, and we've got the second phase of the plan coming. We've got this 25 years to go through. We've got a couple more epochs, I'm sure, epochs. Never mind the 500,000-year-long era and dispensation of Baha'u'lláh to get through. If indeed the manifestations of God have always dawned in the East, and we know other reflections, understandings that the impact of the light of God historically would take place in the world that would have its most, not so much dramatic effect as it might be from a theater or Hollywood standpoint, but the fact that the greatest effect of change of humanity at the time, where society and civilization had sunk so low as to necessitate a manifestation of God to bring the written book and change the character of all mankind, it happened in the East. So by way of a very, how do we say, small, humble, deductive reasoning, the furthest away you would be from that point on the earth might suggest that societies and civilizations, the way of living, had found or acknowledged laws, teachings, character that quite frankly did not necessitate a manifestation of God to dawn there. Yes, there were minor prophets, teachers, those inspired by the light of the East. But there was never a written book that was revealed in the Western Hemisphere. As we read earlier, it was the book of creation that, as Ernest said, was reflective enough of how we should live, what we should do and not do, and ultimately understand that the full relationship of where we're going meant that we're not supposed to be here. There's something beyond. Throughout this endless universe, the greatest means for the progress and renewal of existence is that all things are eaters and eaten. This is a condition that applies to all the particles of the universe, and it is through this means that created things are renewed, transformed into one another, and endowed with a new reality unlike the previous one. And indeed, this is the means of renewal. If we take a braid of sweetgrass and we consider all the things that we might find so meaningful, so precious, so known, this umbilical cord between our culture, our families, our Creator. And in this part of the world, there was an understanding that in this cycle and in somehow interpreting, either through vision and dream, of course, that we know through Baha'u'lláh, that that's a reality, but then ingenuity, curiosity, testing. Again, as Neil said, tens of thousands of years. This just didn't happen overnight. Revelation itself requires at least 1,000 years for a full course of the book to enter into society. But something in our culture understood that all of that preparation, all of that braiding, all of that understanding had to be transformed. It had to move back and forward at the same time. Imagine any point on a circle. If this was just any point of the circle and I'm facing this way, and I begin braiding with my children, my education, my career, my relationships, all the way back around until, like David, I'm ready to leave this world. Or I understand that this interconnectedness of all things, what if I just turn around? And as Baha'u'lláh suggests, see the end in the beginning, and I see right there the fulfillment of all this work, and it returns to the source. It returns to base element. It returns to the earth. And before we understood that heaven and hell is not that guy downstairs with the horns and so on, that we return to our Creator. I have reached a point of sharing this clip and this thought that I had mentioned earlier that I was a little bit nervous about, and so I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Gerald Filson comes to mind. We were working on a project years ago, and we hit this kind of point where we were a bit unsure what to do, and he said, Jordan, Damn the torpedoes. Just give her. All right. Thanks, Gerald. You know, we all have been raised and taught from our artists, theologians, our thinkers of the past. In this day and age, from 1844 onwards, as it also suggests from The Guardian that future historians will look back, and I always think to myself, we're producing so little, or it's so funny, or how long does it take to get things kind of approved through our literature process? Like, what do you mean future historians? Well, sometimes, again, we're not the only ones producing content. The whole world, this book of creation is available, but what is it getting put into a framework for us to really understand and to work with? There was an artist who passed some time ago that provided a means of interacting with life and lesson, particularly for children, but also use a means of reflecting that through Muppets. Muppets. The Dark Crystal is a film that I grew up with that, as much as I appreciate Shakespeare and Rumi, Khalil Gibran's book, The Prophet, is a favorite. All these others that might seem to suggest a little bit more of that seasoned academic, well thought out, more dignified, whatever you want to characterize it with. As a child, though, growing up and not understanding what I was seeing, but understanding how I was feeling, the end scene of this film, which is this whole kind of allegory, whether you kind of pick up on it or not, is significant of who we are as human beings. As Abdu'l-Bahá says, this demarcation line within us of the lower and higher nature. And there's always this kind of sense of one has to beat out the other. One you leave behind, one has no value. That story of the two wolves in battling within you, which one do you feed is the one that survives, all these things, conquering of the lower nature and the self. But I don't know anywhere that I found in that said, disappears, like it ceases to be. It might just be that it's forever facing the other way. That you're not now looking at things of ego, of passion, of ignorance. If you're all focused on knowledge, on unity, etc., you just won't see it. Let your eye be chaste. This last scene of this film sees these two representations of character that come together. The whole film, you're made to believe that these two characters are separate and are at war, and it's never told what this fulfillment of this prophecy of the Dark Crystal, which in and of itself is a further example of being broken. And through the alignment of the stars of that world, that universe where this is set, is when this kind of confluence comes down, and that's the only place to heal this crystal and effectively heal its inhabitants.
What was sundered and undone shall be whole, the two made one. prophecy is fulfilled. We are again one.
You know, and once again, there's that character in the midst of that. Who is it that always comes to provide us that explanation and understanding? There's a woman, a soothsayer, a witch in that character. And she provides this guidance to the characters to bring that crystal and eventually describe what is happening. Why does Abdu'l-Bahá say that women have a higher degree of intuition than men? Because he must... He must have known that we wouldn't, that's why we don't listen to him often. Okay, I got 2 more slides and I see my counter. It's reminding me of if you've ever been to convention and you get up there with that 3-minute timer. Oh, it's bringing back some PTSD on those moments because you're trying to get everything out, right? And I'm looking for my mom in the back because she used to be the one to stand up and say, thank you, you can sit down. It was very kind of, anyway. Okay. Why? Why did you, if your lineage, if your family history can be traced to the other side of the ocean, why did you come? Why this way? Why east to west? I'm going to give you just my own thought, my own interpretation, and again, it might come as a bit of the wall, but I'm so anxious for oneness. This is where I'm going with it. Severed relationship. We would have heard from my dear brother Rolando and his intuitive, brilliant, far quicker tenured wife, Marl, described domination, this sense of we're the top of the food chain, we're the apex predator, we dominate the earth. Cain and Abel, this story, this acknowledgement of the first time that all of a sudden we realized we could kill our brother. Knowledge, so much of this conference reflecting on how to develop this intelligence, this sense of self, of awareness, of mind. The written book, which for quite some time has been written by you-know-who. And they weren't listening to women and their intuition and saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't add that in the book. And attachment. And things become more important than your relationships, the earth, the very things that produce those things, as mentioned earlier, consumerism. All of these to me represent, why did you come? Because all of these things for millennia have been severed. One dispensation, one event, one civilization, one story at a time. Over here, on the other hand, there was an understanding of sacred relationship. And it began with our mothers. It began knowing that we not only come into this world, this womb of this world, but this is the true world and the life-giving waters of our mothers. The book of creation, there's nothing written, there's nothing, you can scratch whatever you want into a rock, which now we see, thankfully. It's very fascinating with petroglyphs and otherwise. But it's a scratch. The creation and the backdrop still stands today. Service, giving, a constant understanding of everything we possess has to be returned. Many people were coming up and asking Borna for things. He might have to learn this lesson because they were asking him for his clothes even, and he wasn't going to give it to them. But you have to understand that those things were given to him in this light of ceremony. And so he wears them in recognition of that relationship. It's not just a vest or a medallion. One human family, this acknowledgement that we're not alone, we're waiting. We're waiting. We don't know who you are, we don't know what you look like, we might have indications, but we're waiting. And we don't know. We have to not know. It's dangerous to know. You put those two things together. Why did you come? What is the relationship between it all? And it reminds me, once again, why was ceremony so important to us when things were brought and there was a measure in there to change them into something else. This last little clip is an acknowledgement of this question that comes, and for Indigenous people in particular, we may not want to answer if we have an opportunity to consider, to reflect.
Tell me what happened, Thomas. Tell me what's going to happen.
That whole film, that whole scene, that whole character he plays, Dr. Evan Adams, and in this moment concludes that film and that story. And that I could describe for you everything once again of what I've tried to express to you, but what I would offer now as my parting thought of why you came, and I'm going to respectfully blame Pat Verge for this. She's out there somewhere. I told Pat yesterday I might do this as well, because Pat asked me a question once. And the way that Pat does things, the way a true journalist, a writer, as Baha'u'lláh describes, like to do something that just simply reflects and doesn't try to interpret. She asked a question that was like a black hole that sucked me in, and it allowed me to just say things that came out of me. I couldn't think about it. I think you've all come here to die. I think you've been running from the treatment of your ancestors to Jesus, to the Bab. Is it not the guardian who described that God is not forgotten what is due the people who have treated his messengers? What you've done to the earth, what you've done to your societies. When I say you, I'm kind of thinking of those guys with the crowns and the hats, the kings and ecclesiastics for the most part, but nevertheless, all of that has now come over here to us, and now we're dealing with it. But in that fire that would change that sweet grass into smudge, into something renewed, you have come to consume us, you've come to eat us. This land is your tomb. And that renewal that we will rise up out of that last clip of that film, I'm desperate for. I am so desperate. To me, that migration from west to east can only occur. We were not going to be able to, my ancestry, my communities are not going to be able to leave this hemisphere until we fully are consumed as well. And after that, perhaps again, 500 years, 1,000 years, perhaps the next dispensation will provide us further opportunity, further system, further understanding to take that step so objectively, because of right now, yes, we have to just deal with what we have. But I'd like to leave that thought with you. I'd like to thank you for your attention, your care, your love to this executive. And I'm so very honored to know that we'll have our relative Bev come to pray and to close this gathering. Merci.